Hi everybody, it's Dr. Jay Bowen here at New Jersey Regenerative Institute, and welcome back to our YouTube channel. If you follow us on social media, you'll know that we have a great guest today who's been truly transformative and having an impact in the world of rehabilitation medicine and disability research. And so if you don't follow us on social media, please hit that like and subscribe button, go to TikTok, X, whatever it is, so you don't miss anything and all these interviews that are coming up or new information. So with that, of course, perfunctory stuff out of the way, I'm going to hear, and I'm very happy to introduce Mr. Rodger DeRose, who's the CEO and president of the Kessler Foundation. And Rodger, if you just want to introduce yourself and give us a little background, appreciate that.
Sure, Jay. It's great to be with you. It's a pleasure to work with you, first of all, and also to be on your program here. My background was in the business world for 30 years. And after I retired from the business world, working for a consumer goods company, SC Johnson, and then Arthur Andersen, I decided that I wanted to do something in the nonprofit world. And I thought that this was a great opportunity as a way to kind of give back, or at least leave a thumbprint on something that could be beneficial to society and other people. And so I've been with the foundation now for 17 years here at Kessler Foundation. And it's been a very exciting journey, and one where, I often say that, if you're not excited about driving into work, to get to your job, then you're probably in the wrong profession. And I still feel that every day, driving into Kessler Foundation and doing the type of work that we do here at the foundation. And the foundation is really focused as a mission of focused on two areas: research to improve the functional benefits of people that have had traumatic injuries like brain or spinal cord injury, strokes, multiple sclerosis. We work in the field of autism, and we also work in other neuromuscular areas as well. But we're also an organization that gives grants to other nonprofits that are creating employment opportunities for people with disabilities, because working with a disability is still a very stubborn issue in the United States in terms of people with disabilities being fully engaged in the workforce. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do at the foundation. And it's a very, very exciting mission, and one that's driven with the passion of about 190 employees that we have in the foundation. And they get up every day and make it an exciting place to do great work every day.
Yeah, I mean, I met Rodger. So my partner, Jerry Malanga, who passed, was hired, had some administrative responsibilities at the Kessler Institute for Rehabilitation. And so I was there also with him and employed there temporarily before we moved out on our own. And then, we sort of moved forward, and, Jerry had a great vision to try to take some of these new novel technologies like regenerative medicine and do things that really people weren't doing and still aren't doing, unfortunately. And that is to take the rehab or the research, perspective of regenerative medicine, which is what we focus on, and not just take the people who can afford it themselves and follow their outcomes, but also to try to find funding so we can take people who are less fortunate, people with disabilities, people in the inner city, and offer these options to them and see, do they respond in the same manner? And what kind of impact would these people who have unique situations, like a spinal cord injury patient who's wheelchair dependent, who can't really rest their shoulders or do things that an able-bodied or ambulatory person would do? And so that was an interesting challenge. And, that's what we're still committed toward, even with Jerry's passing, and with Rodger's support. And what we do at the foundation is to try to, take my little area of expertise and incorporate that into the large vision that the foundation has. So I just want to thank you, publicly, for all your support. You've been great, and it really helped us as well as we can help others. So when you started this and you came in, and I know you've grown it quite a bit and had a huge impact, sort of what really was your vision, or where did you sort of change the foundation, if any, when you came in?
Well, we were really two organizations at the time. It was the hospital had just been sold. Prior to me arriving, they did a hospital conversion where Kessler Institute, which was owned by the foundation, the assets were owned by the foundation. It was sold to Select Medical, and the proceeds from the sale were really used to do this two-part mission that I mentioned to you. One, research, and the other part, employment initiatives for people with disabilities. So the first thing that we really had to do was to bring both sides of the organization together. It was a much smaller organization back then, Jay. There were only like 65 people in the organization, primarily research. And as I said, today we're 190, and by the end of calendar year 2025, we'll be well over 200. But the first part was really bringing two different cultures together. And whenever you bring two organizations together, that's always a challenge in of itself. And we were successful in doing that first step. And then from there, it was really bringing together and having the right team in place. And I think, having the right team is so critical to the growth of the organization in terms of how those people interact, the trust that they have with one another, obviously integrity and working with each other and collaboration. But that group came together over a period of time, and it's led us to the organization that we have today. But I would tell you that, Jay, in order to go from 65 people to close to 200 people, to go from a few $1 million in grants that were won at the federal level and the state level and private foundations, to nearly $30 million in grants and donations that have been coming in now in this particular year. It really has been by, I think, setting as a team these moonshot projects in terms of thinking big and then putting efforts and resources behind them. For example, and we'll get to regenerative therapies that you kindly mentioned earlier, which I think is a moonshot project. The first one that we did was really in the area of building our own neuroimaging center. Our scientists wanted to have a way of measuring the impact of the interventions that they were doing on spinal cord as well as brain cognition. And so their biggest wish at that time, as a Christmas wish, was really to have our own dedicated neuroimaging center with a 3 Tesla scanner. And we built that with the great support that we had from our board, and invested $6 million into a dedicated neuroimaging center. And because of that center, as an example, that neuroimaging center with the 3T scanner, our scientists over that period of time, I mean, think about it now, 11 years later, here we are in 2024 going into 2025. The researchers have won over $55 million in new grants, and with 5,500 scans associated with those grants. If they didn't have that scanner, Jay, they would have to stand behind clinicians, probably in Newark at Rutgers, and try to find time to get those scans done from a research perspective to do pre and post studies of the intervention that was done. So that was one very large moonshot project, to have our own dedicated scanner. And that was something that I think generated exciting outcomes from the point of view of having our own tool set, where we could go to NIH and Department of Defense and say that we have the equipment right on site, and that that we can get our research projects done. Another major one was in the area of robotics. In 2011, being one of the very first rehabilitation research organizations to to purchase an exoskeleton from Exobionics. And that led to purchasing 8 more and then moving towards the Rewalk from Israel and the Indigo exoskeleton, and now the Wandercraft from Paris. And you know what we find, Jay, by making those types of investments in that area, that many of the manufacturing companies that are in the exoskeleton area, they come to us to collect the data that they need to get FDA clearance for their device, whether it's in brain injury or spinal cord injury or stroke or MS or other neuromuscular conditions in using those devices. So that was another moonshot project in terms of making huge investments and leveraging the investments that the board allowed us to make. I think the third one, and then I'll give you a fourth example, has been the third one was the building of the Spinal Stimulation Center, the Tim and Caroline Reynolds Spinal Stimulation Center. And this is a center where our research team have been doing transcutaneous stimulation over the skin on the spinal cord and epidural implants. And the transcutaneous stimulation is a series of algorithms, signals that are sent to the spinal cord and reconnect brain intention with the healthy neurons that are still living below the spinal cord injury. And by doing that, and by working through the years on the right set of algorithms, we can actually control blood pressure. We can help to reduce issues with bowel and bladder issues for a spinal cord patient. We can control sexual function to a large degree and help patients that have issues with sexual function. And we can, below the level of injury, establish movement where the patient never had movement before. And our long-term goal is, of course, to have patients walking over ground. And that is something that we're working towards. We just did our first epidural implant on the spinal cord, surgery, and we did that on November 7th, and that patient is now involved in 80 very intensive 4-hour rehabilitation sessions with us. So that was another very large moonshot project, as I call it. And I would give you the fourth example, Jay, is the one that we're doing with you. And prior to you and working alongside you was Dr. Jerry Malanga, who I considered, along with yourself, pioneers in the field of regenerative therapies and what we're doing for using adipose tissue for injuries in the shoulder for spinal cord patients that have had damaged shoulders from pushing their wheelchairs, to basic military training where military trainees have damaged meniscus, and working with them through adipose tissue as well to regain the damaged function that they have from the torn meniscus. And I'm hoping that we can see longer term gains from the work that we're doing in regenerative medicine as well as therapies, that other orthopedic surgeons and the insurance industry and others will start to see this as a middle ground intervention following rehabilitation, but before getting to the very expensive and intensive surgeries that are involved as well. So those are my hopes as we set out on some of these moonshot projects that I call them, that have really given us the growth that we've experienced in the 17 years that I've been so fortunate to work with a great team inside the organization, and having the full support of a board that invests in business plans that make sense to them, and then doing these types of projects.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about moonshot, right? So JFK had the moonshot and they made it to the moon, and that was just one thing. You've got four, and you've, pretty much accomplished a lot of them, even though we want to flesh out even more in each of those areas.
Right.
So it's amazing where we've done things in spinal cord injury with the shoulder that I thought would fail. And it's amazing because they just can't rest. And they're not only just pushing their wheelchair, but these guys that are sort of old, 40-year-old spinal cord injury patients, they're funny. They like grab their wheelchair and they throw it over the truck and they yank it out and they pull themselves up. And it's like, some people when they would visit us and we were at Kessler would see people in wheelchairs and like, well, I shouldn't really complain about my shoulders too much. Like, I'm just trying to throw a baseball, and these guys, they need to live their life.
Yes. And it's
So,
just remarkable to see the gains the functional gains that they're achieving, post-injury.
yeah, so I mean, we've talked about a lot of different areas. Is there a couple or one patient that sort of sticks out, or one case that you've heard about from the researchers or anyone else that is
Well,
sort of like, hey,
there's so
this is
many.
amazing. Yeah, it's
Okay?
probably like one a week, right? But it's just like
There
something that's
are.
like, wow, that I would never expect.
Jay, there are two that come to mind. One in regenerative therapy, where the individual was a firefighter and he was damaged in a fire-related accident that he was hurt and hurt his shoulder and we became a spinal cord patient to begin with. But after pushing his wheelchair for so many years, damaged the tendons in his shoulder. And you and Jerry did the adipose tissue treatment. And, it's remarkable to hear his testimonial in terms of the pain and agony that he had in his shoulders. But then following the regenerative therapy that you did with adipose tissue with Jerry, I think miraculous recovery that he has. And he was so impressed with the one shoulder that he wanted to do the second shoulder. So I think that was one where functional gains were so impressive. I think another one that comes to
Just
mind.
about that firefighter, do you
Sure.
remember like how long ago that was, and have you been in contact with him to know how well he's doing now?
Well, I know he's still doing very well, and this is like 6 years post the treatment that you and Jerry did. So, from my understanding, he's moved to Florida, where this is God's resting place here in Florida, where I am right now. Not that I'm planning to rest here; I'm planning to come back to New Jersey. But he moved to Florida after living in Pennsylvania, and he's doing very well post-treatment as well. The other example I'd give you, Jay, is an individual that was involved in our Center for Spinal Stimulation. He's a spinal cord patient. He was injured in a gunshot wound, and he was an innocent bystander. And he was injured 13 years ago, had no movement below the level of injury for those 13 years, Jay. And he was involved in our transcutaneous study, which is the stimulation on the skin over the spinal cord. And after, I would say, 20 to 30 treatments, he actually told the staff that was working with him, the physical therapists and Dr. Gail Forrest, that he thought he could move below the level of injury. And so the therapist said, well, demonstrate to us what you're talking about. And he was actually moving his legs below the level of injury, which he had no movement before. The therapist was actually putting pressure on the legs and having him kick his leg up. And he was actually pushing against the therapist's downward pressure to show that he could actually move his leg. And it was repetitive. It wasn't a one-off. And so when you see those types of breakthroughs and the interventions actually taking place, you can really feel the benefit of the work that you do. And I think that's what drives the passion of so many of the people that we have here at Kessler Foundation, Jay.
Yeah, trying to help our fellow man and whatever God's gifts they gave us, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So, thanks so much for that. As everybody hopefully knows, we're gonna have a part two. So if you didn't hit that, subscribe or like button or bell notification, you should do it now. That way you'll be notified when the second one drops. But we'll be seeing Rodger next week and we'll talk a little bit more, try to expand on some of the things we talked about. So again,
Thank
hit
you
the
so
social
much.
media, X, Instagram, YouTube, all that kind of stuff, because you guys know what to do. And listen, it doesn't cost you anything and it helps us out a lot. Hit that like button again. All right. Thanks, Rodger. We'll see you
Thank
next
you,
week.
Jay. Thank you so much.